psychotherapy a little bit. By the way, that is Freud's original couch. And coaching. What are the differences? Okay. I think from the things we've talked about today, about this coaching and psychotherapy paradigm, we can start making some comparisons and contrasts. We have about 15 minutes left. So what are some of the comparisons and contrasts? It's a more of an egalitarian stance. Remember that power differential is minimized, probably can't be eliminated. It's minimized in coaching. It's strength-based. Laura Whitworth's term is the relationship in the process is co-created. We play equal parts in creating it, and it's a very developmental, underlying normal developmental process that coaching focuses on. Psychotherapy tends to work with the 10%, deficit, past-focused. Traditionally, it's a diagnostic approach and remedial in nature. And those of you who are psychotherapists who don't work this way, I totally get it, but what are the whole psychotherapy payer system in the United States is all based on that model. You can't get paid to do psychotherapy unless you give someone a diagnosis. It's built into the whole system. It's the psychotherapy paradigm incarnate in terms of how people can be helped within the payer systems that fund for human change in the mental health system. I just talked a little bit about mentors. Mentors tend to be an expert role. In fact, I wouldn't hire a mentor unless they were an expert. That's why I'm hiring them, right? The mentor helps force some of the agenda. It's like the mentor knows the things that you need to do developmentally, so they may not force that, but they make a lot of suggestions. Look, here's the things you need to do, here's the people you need to know, here's the things that are going to advance your career. There's more of a directedness from it. And generally, although some coaching engagements can become longer-term relationships, they tend to be shorter, and mentoring relationships tend to be over the course of one's career. Really good mentoring relationships. You might even move to another company and still maintain some kind of contact with your mentor, because this is like almost like a marriage. It's like, we're really partnering together here. Me as the senior person and you, or vice versa, and this is something that we're going to see evolve over time. So that's consulting, mentoring, psychotherapy, and coaching. I don't have time to go this into depth. One of the first things I did to answer this question, what's the difference between coaching and psychotherapy, was actually Lynn Meinke prompted me. I was going to start a listserv for coaches to talk about this coaching psychotherapy thing. Lynn said, no. Form a special interest group with the International Coach Federation. So I did, and I ran it for about 5 years. And the really cool thing about this is having a sense of the future. I recorded a bunch of these calls, and these calls are masterful coaches coming to talk about how they do coaching and their personal understanding of the distinction between coaching and psychotherapy. And they do it in a really fascinating way where you kind of get this distinction from their perspective with the kind of coaching that they do. And most of them had some kind of a therapy background. They were like myself, they came from a therapy background, then became coaches. So it was kind of like them coming and sharing like I'm sharing with you today. They'd usually talk about a client they worked with and how it worked and how they stayed in the coaching paradigm. Pretty cool stuff, if I may say so myself. I am not going to have time to go over all these core competencies, but those of you who are coaches, you already know this. The International Coach Federation defines coaching as people who are trained and become competent in doing these 11 things. It's what distinguishes a coach from a non-coach. Coaches know how to do these things. People who call themselves coaches and don't know how to do these things, they're just calling themselves coaches, okay? Here's some other resources. Lynn Meinke and I have written a book on choosing coaching as a career. The ICF, Institute of Coaching through Harvard, Center for Coaching in Healthcare is a really interesting site if you have a healthcare background. And the Institute for Life Coach Training, Lynn Meinke and I are faculty members there. It's one of the few coaching schools, there's a handful of them in the country that actually are designed to help mental health professionals make the transition into coaching. It's helping them look at the skill set that they bring to the coaching, but not shortchanging or cutting the coaching training itself. It helps you really focus on the things that are going to help you become a good coach. And someone who doesn't have a therapy background or that kind of training, they need to focus on some other things that they need to learn. I wanted to mention some of the research. The coaching profession is young, but it's developing an evidence-based body of knowledge that's really distinguishing it as a profession. It's helping support empirically this paradigm that I've been describing today, because that is the course of science. You develop a paradigm, it competes with other paradigms, but then you've got to gather data to kind of prove your case, right? The ICF Research Portal is something the International Coach Federation's board decided to do several years ago, because they said we need a repository of evidence, of studies. And it's really interesting. When I chaired the research committee, my goal was to set a pretty low bar, actually, in terms of what was out there, because the coaching profession is very young in its research. We didn't want to set the bar so high that only a scholarly, vetted, research journal quality articles would get published, because there wasn't that much out there. So we set the bar pretty low. We made sure there was no marketing stuff in it and things like that. And there's just a bunch of stuff out there to survey, from industry articles, research articles, reports, case studies, industry links, and I really emphasize dissertations and theses on my tenure, because you would be surprised at the explosion of research and coaching that's taking place in master's theses and doctoral theses. It's like going like this, and it's going to continue, and it's going to help form that evidence-based substrate of just basic research that people have done, because coaching is catching on like wildfire. It's catching on like wildfire in graduate schools. So coaching is becoming more and more the topic of research in higher education. Well, let me talk a little bit about the legislative and regulatory implications of all this, because I think we've got enough data points here to start talking about this now. I hope it's pretty clear to all of you by now that if as coaches we're working with the 90%, we're not working with a vulnerable population, okay? That makes a huge difference in terms of what the regulatory implications are. I believe that a self-regulating profession in coaching is perfectly appropriate and has many advantages over a jurisdictional regulatory body. For one thing, my coaching is international. And if I'm coaching someone in Florida, I don't want the Board of Psychology in Florida to call me in St. Louis and say, why are you talking to somebody in Florida? Well, it's because it's my business. It's what I do. This is one of the problems with jurisdictional regulatory agencies is they become jurisdictional fiefdoms, and they actually limit the growth of business. And there's other ways to regulate a profession than jurisdictional. And a self-regulating profession like the coaching profession is demonstrating exactly how you can. Here's one of my points. Barbers and beauticians come into contact with the mental health population more than coaches do, okay? I mean, people who have psychological problems, they need haircuts, right? They don't always need a coach. In fact, they're usually not seeking out a coach. The coaching population tends to be self-selecting. The people who are selecting coaches, and because coaching is always voluntary, it's like, there's a self-selection process that takes place that helps create more assurance that coaches really are coaching in that 90%. So the power differential is minimized, and coaches practice within their competency and refer immediately. Yeah.
Quick comment.
Yeah.
You don't have to limit it to barbers and beauticians.
Well,
almost every profession, and I'm a business broker, but if you look at the lawyers and accountants, they come into contact with the mental health population too.
We could have made an exhaustive list.
Barbers and beauticians.
And the only point of that exhaustive list, why would coaches be singled out as registering themselves as unlicensed therapists? If you're going to do that, you may as well have barbers,
yes,
beauticians.
You could have lawyers and accountants.
Yeah,
Financial advisors.
the list could go on endlessly. Here's the other, this is just my personal experience. Over the last 10 years of being a coach, I have never in the last 10 years met a coach that was practicing outside of their competency. If anything, most of the coaches I meet, especially if they don't have a psychotherapy or mental health background, their antennae are up for psychotherapy stuff. And when they see it, they don't want to have anything to do with it. It's not why they became a coach. The last thing they want to do is do psychotherapy with someone. And this is to a person. I've never met a coach who doesn't have a mental health background who's ever even come close to wanting to deal with a psychotherapy issue in coaching. They immediately refer. In fact, if anything, sometimes I think they're a little bit too urgent to refer. That's why I've done some work with some coaches who don't have a therapy background, and coaches do learn referral techniques. Lynn Meinke has published an article, 10 top reasons to refer to a therapist. There's a lot of things going in the coaching profession to help facilitate those referrals, but coaches do not practice outside their competency. I've never seen it in the last 10 years. So that's another legislative implication. So practicing within one's competency is required by the ethics code. There's a white paper that the folks here are developing that includes as an attachment the ethics code from the ICF, something that they're probably going to make available to legislators here in Colorado. Making referrals is routine and a best practice for coaches, and it's required by the ethical code. And that's not, see, if I don't have to have all the answers in relation to my coaching client, what does that allow me to do? Say, I don't know, and find out. So where is the answer? Oh, well, I think I need to talk to a financial planner. Oh, well, how do you find a financial planner? Right? So it's not just referral to psychotherapy. Coaches refer to all sorts of people all the time because they don't for a minute presuppose that they have all the answers. So they're open to anyone having the answers. The idea is helping the client find their answers, not having the answers, right? So coaches don't need to be regulated as unlicensed therapists any more than barbers or petitions do. In fact, coaching clients self-select. Wow, I can't believe we got through all this. Those are my prepared remarks, and I think we wanted to open this to question and answer comments. We wanted to allow some time for that so we can start this ongoing conversation, because I certainly have been dominating the conversation tonight, but that's what I was asked to do. So what thoughts do people have? Howard?
Yes, question. First
Question.
of all, thank you very much. What's the thinking that's motivating having coaching be licensed?
I'm not the one to answer that question, and I don't know if anyone knows, can peer into the hearts and souls of legislators.
Well, legislators are obviously looking for revenue sources, and that's a main driver.
No,
You
that's
don't
not
think
it.
so?
What is the question again, please?
What's motivating the desire to have coaching be licensed or regulated?
Okay, the motivation really is that a misunderstanding of what coaching is and a desire to protect the public from having some kind of intervention that the regulatory board thinks is psychotherapy, not being regulated. So their concern is really for the public and a misunderstanding of what coaching is.
Okay, and is that, every stage, or where, give me a little bit more on where that may have started, or?
At what stage, what?
What's the
State.
state?
I mean,
State.
are we talking all 50 states? 'Cause
We're
isn't
talking
it-
the state of Colorado because in most states, you cannot practice psychotherapy without a license. In the state of Colorado, you can practice psychotherapy if you're on a database of unlicensed psychotherapists. So it becomes an issue in the state of Colorado.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yes, in the back.
What sorts of language should we stay away from on our websites, business cards, promotional materials, description of our programs to keep us out of hot water?
Wow, that's a great question. There is, I'm wondering if I have some of this on my website. I've looked at a lot of the early stuff on the distinction between coaching and psychotherapy in the field of coaching was kind of linguistic analysis. These are coaching words, these are therapy words. We don't use these words because they're therapy words, we do use these words, they're coaching words. And I think that's helpful to a degree, but I don't know that people going over those lists of words are clear on the distinction in the way I hope you might be clear at this moment. Because it's not just about the words. So you might want to look at some of that literature. You know, I think the clearer you are on this distinction, the clearer you are in your language on your webpage. That's the best I can do right now.
So you said you have some of that language on your website?
I know I've got a couple of those documents lying around. You know what, grab my card, email specifically what you're looking for, and I'll try to dig up some things that's